We went from earning £0 to £20,000 in profit every single month using the rent-to-rent strategy. In this video, we're going to be talking about exactly how we got here, where we have full financial and time freedom to enjoy the life that we want. This video is a tell-all of all of our mistakes, successes, and everything that we needed to do to get us to where we are today. So we need to take you back to the beginning, to where it all started. I'm Ben.
I'm Holly.
We've been together for 6 years now. We don't have any kids, but we do have a little dog called Richmond.
About 5 years ago now, we were both working full-time in Leeds city centre. Our main goal back then was to move into the city and rent an apartment. Although we were both in full-time jobs, we did want our own business one day, but we just didn't know where to start or what we wanted to do.
Then in March 2020, COVID struck and we were thrown into furlough. Life literally got put on hold. After a few months of lockdown and twiddling our thumbs, we were getting a little bit bored, and Holly came up with a bit of an idea to start a business.
So my parents had 3 Airbnbs, all of which I'd been heavily involved in growing up, and I realised that there was definitely a passion there. I also realised that there was a need in the village that I'm originally from for a small local property management company, which could help with all of the holiday cottages that were there. So in June 2020 is where we came up with the business idea of having a property management company in Haworth. So in June 2020 is where the business was born, and I decided to go on a bit of a mission to create a logo, a website, and start reaching out to property owners in the area.
It didn't take us long to land our first client, 2 holiday cottages just down the road. We were doing absolutely everything for these properties, talking to the guests, taking bookings, we were even cleaning them. Things were going well until we actually went off of furlough and back to our full-time jobs. We weren't really making a ton of money, but we were gaining a lot of experience about the industry. We were keeping busy up until the point that furlough came to an end and we had to go back to our full-time jobs. That's where things got a little bit tricky. We were trying to balance this new business/hobby plus our 9-to-5 jobs. In January 2021, we actually purchased our first home together, which was really, really exciting because it was this brand new chapter. However, this meant that we were now living an hour away from these cottages that we were looking after. So things started to get a little bit tricky and we had to implement things such as cleaners so that we weren't doing it anymore, so that we could keep the business running.
This was a really exciting time for us, and we knew we wanted to have our own Airbnb one day. We thought the next step for us would be to buy a property and have that as an Airbnb, but as we just bought our first home, it felt like a million miles away.
Fast forward to November 2021. That's the first time that I'd come across the rent-to-rent strategy. I was simply just watching videos on YouTube about property. Initially, Holly wasn't really bought in. It didn't seem or feel like the traditional way to going about property, but I was adamant, and so I started reaching out to landlords. It was pretty rough. I had about 3 months of getting rejection after rejection after rejection. The worst part was I didn't really understand what I was pitching or how to pitch it to a landlord or a letting agent, and so I'd get into a conversation with a letting agent, and as soon as I mentioned Airbnb, they were immediately switched off. Back then, the issue was no one really knew what the rent-to-rent strategy was, so most of the time I was having to explain this model to letting agents and landlords, and it just wasn't landing well. The main question that I got a lot of the time was, isn't this subletting? Isn't that illegal? But one day my luck finally changed and a letting agent agreed to a viewing on the basis that this would be run as a short-term let. So February 2022, 3 months after I'd started reaching out to landlords, we get our first deal.
So once we got the keys, it was now time to set up our brand new property, which we were really excited about. The only problem is that we had little to no funds to furnish a 1-bedroom apartment and really no idea where to start, to be honest.
When we got the keys to the apartment, we only had very limited funds. I think it was around about £3,000. So after first month's rent and a deposit, we were left with about £1,600, and we had to furnish an entire 1-bed flat with just that. This meant we cheaped out on everything. We bought the cheapest furniture, and about 6 months later, everything was broken and needed replacing. That was lesson number 1. However, we knew that we needed to focus on the property management side. That's because there was no capital needed up front to get started, and there was little to no risk at all when it came to scaling. So we focused on that throughout 2022. We actually grew to 5 managed properties, and we also added another rent-to-rent in the same building as our first. So we ended 2022 on 5 managed and 2 rent-to-rents. So it was good going, but we knew that we needed to knuckle down and go all in 2023.
And knuckle down we did. In January 2023, we got our 3rd rent-to-rent deal, which was a 2-bed, 2-bath apartment in Leeds city centre with with parking. We were fully locked in to getting our next rent-to-rent deal. We could see the difference in money we could make in the rent-to-rent strategy in comparison to management.
The plan was simple: do as much networking as possible. By putting ourselves out there, opportunities surely would come to us. Then finally, the plan had worked. We got 5 apartments across an entire floor of an apartment block in Leeds city centre. It was like the deal of dreams.
This felt absolutely huge for us. It felt like a life-changing moment, and it was a deal we'd been waiting for, and it actually landed on my birthday. What a birthday treat.
So we'd signed the agreement and we'd started ordering furniture for these 5 apartments. The start date kept getting pushed back, so we had a house full with furniture and decor things, and yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare. Eventually though, we got in there, set up, and the apartments were making really good money.
The only thing to do then was to celebrate with a weekend in London, seeing one of our favourite DJs, staying in one of the nicest suites we've ever stayed in.
All in all, things were turning out really well. The business had grown and the portfolio had now scaled up to 27 properties in total. And around about September time, one of our property owners actually said that they didn't want to Airbnb their property anymore, and so we offered them the opportunity to take it on as a rent-to-rent, which they agreed to. So we had another rent-to-rent under our belt.
So things were going well, maybe a little bit too well, and this is where the problem started to hit. The first problem that we experienced was with the build of where we'd just taken on the 5 apartments in Leeds city centre. We realised that the build wasn't to of great quality, and they still hadn't finished the entranceway of the building, which meant we had guests arriving with rubbish all in the hallways, which definitely wasn't our standard at all.
This was reflecting really poorly on our reviews, and it was damaging our credibility as a business.
Although the apartments were making really great money, the problems were starting to get worse, which meant we did have to make the decision to walk away from the deal. We gave our notice and we were due to leave at the beginning of December.
On top of all this, we also had to give back one of our first ever rent-to-rents in Leeds city centre. Unfortunately, the head lease prohibited short-term stays, and this had been looked over by our landlord, so we had a month to move out of there as well. So within 3 months, we'd end up losing 6 rent-to-rents.
It felt like everything was going wrong all at once, and we were experiencing problems with the management company too. We were having bad guests and bad reviews, and it felt like we were putting in all the hours for not much money at all.
Although nothing was going our way, we knew that we had to keep up with the viewings, the networking, and keep plugging away. We'd done it before, we could do it again.
In November, we actually came across a landlord on LinkedIn who had a building of 5 apartments in the town where we live.
We went for a viewing and instantly fell in love with the building. This was a huge opportunity for us to have our own rent-to-rent block. We came to an agreement with the landlord, signed the deal, and we got the keys on the 1st of December.
This was a huge job for us. We had 5 apartments to fully furnish, and by Christmas Eve, we had them all done and dusted and live.
We ended 2023 on a high. It was glaringly obvious that rent-to-rent was a strategy that we needed to focus on, and we knew exactly how to execute it after all the mistakes that we'd made.
So in 2024, we put all of this back into action. We went on more meetings, did more viewings, and we finally came across our biggest deal yet.
This was huge. It was a massive apartment block in Leeds city centre. Over 200 units were in there. We were given 5 units to start off with, and we cracked on in April 2024.
This is when we could really feel our lives changing. We definitely already achieved financial freedom, but we could now see time freedom too. This is when we could drop the tools and start doing what we loved most.
We went on a ton of holidays, and in the midst of this, we were actually approached by a popular TV show who wanted to feature our block of 5 apartments that we'd taken on just 6 months prior. We took 2 weeks out to do the filming for this TV show, and whilst we were doing that, we were signing on more properties. We came out of that, furnished another property, and then hit the road on a little trip to Monaco.
The beauty of this business is that even whilst we're away, we're still making money. We were so confident in this business model and we're hitting goals we never thought we'd hit so soon. Ben even went out and bought his dream car at the age of 27.
We didn't stop there. We continued doing viewings and more networking, and we continue to add to the portfolio. We're just getting started. This business model has allowed us to do so much with our lives in such a small space of time. We know there's a lot more that we want to achieve, and we can't can't wait to get there. So here we are now. That's our story, and that's exactly what we did in order to get to 20k per month. To understand more about rent to rent, like and subscribe on this video and check out our socials at Ben and Hollie _property, where we share a ton of value about the rent to rent strategy.